Hi, so I just found the most impressive piece of color grading software, and since I'm a complete dummy when it comes to color correction, it definitely helps me elevate my visuals to a pretty much Hollywood-like level. So it's called the Dehancer, and I got the Pro version for Premiere Pro. And this is what it looks like inside Premiere Pro. So it's basically under the effects panel, and the thing I like about it most is that it behaves like a regular default effect in Premiere, just like Lumetri color. And I, as a YouTube editor, actually found two very useful use cases for this plugin. One of them is going to be editing and enhancing B-roll footage that I just found on Pexels.com. Very different footage, very different shots, different colors. And the other one that I'll show you is basically enhancing animations. Just a simple After Effects created animation that I have, and we'll use some simple effects found in the Dehancer Pro plugin. So to get started, let's just apply an adjustment layer over these four shots, and let's drag the Dehancer Pro to the adjustment layer. I found that to be the easiest way to actually manipulate it instead of just applying to each individual clip. So in the Dehancer Pro panel, you have the input, film developer, and a lot of these, I think like 20, even more categories. So to get started, in the input tab, you have the source selection. You can choose particular camera if you have recorded with a particular camera. But for these clips, we are just going to use the default Rec 709 color interpretation. The next tab is film, and this is the most fun one because it has all of these film presets that you can choose, and I just couldn't go over all of them in this video. The ones that I really like the most are pretty much all of the Kodak ones. The Kodak Gold 200 is really nice, really subtle. It makes the footage very movie-like. It just kind of tames all the colors and the shadows. So let's go for that one in this presentations. And already you can see the change in this shot, and you can also see the change in all the other shots. And why I like to use this plugin when working as a YouTube video editor to enhance the B-roll, because it kind of makes everything look pretty uniform, you know. It just feels like it came from the same movie, you know, and that's sort of consistency is something that is very satisfying to see, and it's so simple to achieve with this plugin. And that's why this first use case is the one that I encourage you to explore, especially if you're a YouTube video editor that's probably going to use footage from many different sources and cameras. All right, so to move on, we can simply enable or disable this film effect or this film overlay, and you can clearly see the change in all of these, and it's looking so much better already. But there is so much more to this plugin. For example, you have the film developer and film compression, which we're not gonna really cover too much for this use case. The results I get from by changing these values are kind of too dramatic for what I'm usually going for. You could play around with them. As you can see, the plugin is pretty technical and so many settings you can play around with, but I'll just cover the ones that are really a quick way to enhance the footage you're working with. Same goes for the expand one. It's really gonna mess around with your black and white points a lot, so we're not going to do that for this instance. The print one is an interesting one. It's supposed to emulate a print film and apply that look to the footage itself. I'll disable that one for this instance as well. You also have the color head, where you can manipulate balances between these colors and create like really funky tones. That's definitely something that could be useful for a more artistic project. And then we have probably my favorite, and that's the film grain that I'm just going to have to zoom in for you to see. When it's disabled, the image still looks very digital, but when we enable it and zoom in, it just applies this very nice, natural looking analog grain film that you cannot replicate with any of the noise effects found in Premiere Pro. You also have all of these profiles for different sizes of film with different ISO values. You can play around with that. Higher ISO values will give you a more intense grain, and also smaller film sizes will give you a larger grain. I find the 35mm to be kind of ideal, subtle but still very visible. Then we have the halation. It also gives a very interesting look. It makes the edges have this bleed around them, and that's sort of the old film look. I honestly haven't found any plugin that does it this well and this naturally, because this is just pure gold. I mean, you can see the difference. This one looks like a Hollywood movie, whilst this one looks like a TV broadcast. Next up, we have bloom. You can enable bloom, and all of the highlights are just gonna get this dreamy bloom effect that I also haven't found any other plugin do it this well. You also have all of these different presets. Once again, the 35mm film preset seems to be working best for most of the footage I've used so far. Now, also there's the film damage tab. I haven't really used the film damage all that much because I feel like you don't really have a lot of control over it and it's just so subtle. But it's also pretty neat additional feature to have. Then we have the film breadth, gate weave. Haven't really used any of those, to be honest. I haven't found a good use case for those. We have this overscan that's basically gonna create like a gate, visible gate on your footage. You may find it useful for some use cases or for some projects. I usually don't use it at all. Then we also have the vignette. I mean, vignette is nothing new. It's pretty powerful, pretty good, and the results I get are pretty good and pretty useful. I like to decrease the feather so that I can see where it's happening, and then you can kind of play around with it, maybe even work around with the aspect ratio, increase the size, and then you could increase the feather, and you have like a nice oval vignette very simply, very easily. We can leave it on for this one. And the last one I find useful is actually the output one, where you can actually adjust the total impact of the whole effect to the footage. So if you set it to 50, it's actually gonna be impact the footage at 50% instead of full impact at 100%. So if the effect overall is a bit too strong, you could decrease it so that it is a bit more subtle. And there you have the first use case, making B-roll footage more cinematic and more consistent no matter where it came from. I found that really helpful, especially for YouTube video editors. Alright, so the next a bit unconventional use case I found for this plugin is to use it on animated sequences. So I have a very simple animation I created in After Effects. So let's just apply a Dehancer to an adjustment layer that's gonna be above the animation, and actually I'm gonna disable the film profile for this one. And the ones that I'm gonna use are gonna be bloom, and I'll enable a bloom at 16mm, and it's just gonna give a really subtle glow effect to all of the highlights, so you can see the difference. And we're also going to apply the film grain so that we get this really nice analog type of grain that's going to give just a bit more texture to the animation itself. And I'm going to apply a vignette, just a really subtle vignette that's going to create a bit more focus on the middle side of the vignette. And I'll just play around with the aspect ratio. I actually like this oval vignette, and maybe we could even make it a bit darker and then go back with the feather at, say, 100, maybe even 75. Let's see. Yeah, that's nice. And we can enable the film damage property as well. Why not? And already you can see that the whole animation just got a bit more flair, got a bit more texture, just looks a bit more polished with just a few clicks. That's what I like it. And once you have this preset, you can just apply it to any other animation you may have in your project, because it's that simple. You know, instead of going in After Effects, playing with overlays, adjustment layers, individual effects, you know, just to create this sort of simple glow around these, you would need to spend much more time than I just spent here in the Dehancer Pro plugin. Alright, so those are two best use cases I found as a YouTube video editor for this very powerful and a very good Dehancer Pro plugin for Premiere Pro. Now, they do have Dehancer for DaVinci Resolve for Final Cut, as well as obviously Adobe After Effects and Premiere Pro for photography software, and also for mobile. Now that's crazy. They do have this for iPhone. You know, being able to apply these sorts of effects and getting this sort of video quality on your phone just sounds insane to me. Plus, you also have the Dehancer online for photos. So if you want to give it a try, use my promo code Luca. You'll get a 10% off discount. This is by far the most powerful color grading plugin I've ever used, so I encourage you to give it a try. It's highly recommended by me. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.